I'm Chap Bettis, author of The Disciple Making Parent, and this is my audio blog where I read some of my blog posts in audio format for your convenience. Well, in today's episode, we're going to be thinking about how parents can exasperate their children. Well, in a blog post a few weeks before this one, we saw that Scripture commands our children to honor us, and that's in Ephesians 6, 1-3. But God also has instructions for us as parents. Positively, we're to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord, and I unpack this in Parenting with Confidence. But before God gives us the positive exhortation, He gives us a negative command. Don't exasperate your children. Some versions translate this verse as, don't provoke your children to anger. And Colossians 3:21 is a parallel verse. In it, fathers and all parents are commanded not to embitter or provoke our children. What does it mean to exasperate your children? Well, the definition of the word is to frustrate someone intensely, to make something feel futile, to provoke them, to push their buttons. The word literally is to make angry from close beside. The point of these verses is clear. While we are the authority in our children's lives, that authority is not absolute. We're bigger, we're more powerful, and we can sin against them. We have louder voices. We have an adult mind and adult experiences and vocabulary. As a result, God commands us to examine ourselves. We're not to use our authority haphazardly. Before I list ways adults can provoke children, I want to provide some context. I'm shocked by the number of young parents today who say they need to go to a therapist to deal with issues from their parents. Some have gone so far as to cut off contact with good parents. In effect, these young adults are saying they have wounds from their childhood that they must recover from. I'm about to list ways that parents can sin greatly and wound their children. But normal, everyday life and sin is not a pattern of exasperation. Our parents are a shaping influence in our lives, and that includes the good and the bad. So that means that we all have benefits given to us by our parents, and we will have ways our parents were lacking. And that lack may be through sin or mistakes or lack of wisdom. But imperfection is not wounding exasperation. None of us are perfect parents, nor are we so fragile that we must have perfect parents. So, as we enter into this list, let's remember we do not have to be perfect parents or we're going to exasperate our kids. No, that's not true. I would suggest that exasperation is prolonged sin against our children in unfair ways that takes advantage of our larger size and position. It's to act in a way that produces an emotional wound. Let me repeat that definition again. It's prolonged sin against our children in unfair ways that takes advantage of our larger size and position. The following is a list of ways that parents can exasperate their children and wound them. Number 1, having a favorite and letting it be known. Favoritism by a parent or grandparent is painful. And I can't even believe that this sin happens, but I hear stories of it, and it is so unfair. So number 1, having a favorite and letting it be known. Number 2, scolding. So rather than taking action, scolding is using loud, demeaning words. Scolding over a long period of time injures a child. We don't need to scold. We need to take appropriate action. Number 3, being extremely inconsistent in discipline. All of us are inconsistent, but to fly off the handle without a plan, that's unfair. Or when we make up rules on the spot and enforce them when we feel like it, that's unjust. When we're disciplining out of revenge and not because we want the best for our child, they can sense it. So number 3, being extremely inconsistent in discipline. Number 4, anger that's out of control. Anger is really at the root of many of these sins. We have to get it under control, and that's why I wrote the Parenting with Patience study. Number 5, not being willing to ask forgiveness. We can give the impression to our children that we're never wrong. So over and over and over again, we're not being willing to ask forgiveness. Number 6, sinful words that attack their identity. Saying things like, you are a failure. You will never amount to anything. Words that attack their identity are satanic and wicked. So there are times all of us fail, certainly, but that doesn't mean we are a failure. Number 7, being emotionally distant. Individuals can withhold affection or sulk to get their own way. Rather than talking about a conflict outright, a person just withdraws and manipulates the situation by being emotionally distant. Number 8, pushing for achievement beyond what's reasonable. Now, I think as parents, we're called to encourage and challenge our children, but we need to realize their capacity. We can be too demanding or never satisfied. Scripture says that God is patient with our shortcomings. You can see that at Psalm 103:13. Are we patient with the shortcomings in our children? So number 8, pushing for achievement beyond reason. Number 9, being overbearing or overprotecting and domineering. Children need to grow into their own person. When our words and our will and our personality constantly overrides theirs, they will rightly be frustrated. So number 9, being overbearing, overprotecting, and domineering. 10, nitpicking. Just constant critique or criticism of small things. We're not giving our children that a feeling of acceptance, but we're pointing out everything that's wrong or could be improved. 11, comparison. Now, children have different gifts and talents. If we don't recognize those differences, but instead insist they be like a sibling or ourselves, we're setting them up for long-term anger. So 11 is comparison. Number 12, and of course, any sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. And I'm sure there are many more ways I've not listed. I'd love to hear what you would add. How can parents exasperate their children? Well, the previous list is focused on large and prolonged attitudes that lead to long-term bitterness. Father wounds and mother wounds, though psychological terms, are describing prolonged embittering by a parent. By repeated patterns, a thoughtless parent can injure their child. The truth is, family life is messy. As sinners bump up against each other, there are going to be times that we commit the sin of exasperation. Small acts of sinning against our children can and should be confessed. And we can't let that stop us from exercising proper authority or living in fear of scarring our children. There are plenty of times when I had to apologize to my children. In a home with plenty of affection, our mistakes are not going to matter. The good news is love truly does cover a multitude of sins. As we seek to have a home of affection and authority, the intentional Christian parent will trust that God knew what he was doing when he gave this child to imperfect creatures like us. We parent by faith in God's goodness, not fear of messing our children up. Thank you for listening to the Disciple Making Parent audio blog. You can find more information like this in our video course, Parenting with Confidence. It's a video-driven study on the biblical foundations of parenting, and it's specifically aimed at parents of young children. You can find more information on our website or at parentingwithconfidencestudy.com. Thanks for listening.